Have you ever gotten that strange feeling, like someone close to you secretly can't stand you, even though they act nice to your face? You brush it off, telling yourself you're just overthinking, but what if you're not? What if their kindness is just a mask, hiding something much darker beneath? We've all had relationships where something feels off. The smiles don't quite reach their eyes, their compliments carry a subtle sting, or you catch them exchanging glances when you walk away. You might dismiss it as paranoia, but legendary psychologist Carl Jung would argue otherwise. He believed that hatred isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it lurks in the shadows of the mind, buried so deep that even the person feeling it doesn't fully realize it. This hidden hostility is part of what Jung called the shadow self, the repressed, darker side of human nature that we try to ignore. And when someone's shadow takes over, their true feelings leak out in subtle, unsettling ways. So how can you tell if someone in your life secretly resents you? Let's break down the key signs, backed by Jungian psychology, that reveal when hatred is hiding in plain sight. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow self is one of his most profound contributions to psychology, and it holds the key to understanding why some people secretly harbor hatred while outwardly appearing friendly. According to Jung, the shadow represents the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, our repressed emotions, suppressed desires, and even our darkest impulses. These aspects don't disappear simply because we ignore them. Instead, they fester beneath the surface, influencing our behavior in ways we may not even recognize. When someone dislikes or resents you but can't admit it, whether out of guilt, social pressure, or self-deception, that hostility gets buried in their shadow. But like a hidden current beneath still waters, it inevitably ripples to the surface in subtle, often contradictory ways. They may insist they care about you, yet their actions betray a lingering bitterness. This is the shadow at work, the unspoken truth that refuses to stay silent. One of the most revealing ways hidden hatred manifests is through projection, a psychological defense mechanism Jung explored in depth. When people can't confront their own negative emotions, they unconsciously assign them to others. For example, someone who secretly resents you might accuse you of being jealous, competitive, or fake, even when you've done nothing to warrant it. In their mind, they're not the problem, you are. This projection allows them to avoid the discomfort of facing their own hostility, preserving their self-image as a good person while casting you as the villain. It's a twisted form of self-preservation, but it leaves unmistakable clues. If you notice someone constantly attributing their own negative traits to you without cause, it's often a sign that they're wrestling with emotions they can't or won't acknowledge. Passive aggression is another hallmark of repressed hatred, serving as a socially acceptable outlet for resentment. Unlike direct confrontation, which would force someone to admit their true feelings, passive aggression lets them express disdain while maintaining plausible deniability. Backhanded compliments, deliberate forgetfulness, sarcasm disguised as humor, or silent treatment, all of these are ways people punish others without taking responsibility for their malice. Jung would argue that this behavior stems from an unconscious conflict. Part of them wants to hurt you, but another part, often shaped by societal norms or personal guilt, refuses to admit that desire. The result is a toxic middle ground where their hatred leaks out in coded, indirect ways. They may not even realize why they're doing it, but the undercurrent of hostility is unmistakable to those who know how to look. What makes these behaviors so insidious is that they thrive in ambiguity. The person in question might genuinely believe they're innocent, their shadow safely tucked away. But psychology tells us otherwise. Unexpressed hatred doesn't vanish. It just finds quieter, more corrosive ways to emerge. And the closer the relationship, the more damaging these dynamics become. Whether it's a friend, family member, or colleague, recognizing these signs isn't about paranoia. It's about understanding the hidden layers of human interaction that Jung spent his life unraveling. The shadow doesn't lie, it just speaks in whispers. And if you know how to listen, you'll hear it. One of the most telling signs that someone secretly harbors resentment toward you is their tendency to engage in excessive criticism, often disguised as concern or helpfulness. On the surface, they may frame their comments as constructive feedback or even playful teasing, but the underlying tone carries a sharp edge. For instance, they might constantly point out minor flaws in your work, your appearance, or your decisions, framing it as them just looking out for you. But when you step back, you notice a pattern. Their critiques are rarely balanced with genuine praise, and they seem to take a peculiar satisfaction in highlighting your mistakes. This behavior often stems from their own unresolved insecurities or envy, which they manage by putting you down. It's a way to assert superiority while maintaining plausible deniability, making it difficult to call them out without seeming overly sensitive. Another subtle yet revealing indicator is the backhanded compliment. A remark that sounds like praise on the surface but carries an undercurrent of disdain. These comments are crafted to make you feel uneasy without giving you a clear reason to object. For example, they might say, "You're so brave for wearing that outfit," which seems like admiration but actually implies there's something wrong with your choice. Or they'll remark, "It's amazing how confident you are even when you're not the most knowledgeable person in the room," blending a superficial compliment with a quiet dig. These remarks are designed to undermine you while keeping their hands clean, leaving you questioning whether you're just imagining the slight. Over time, this tactic erodes your self-assurance, which may be exactly what they want, to keep you off balance and in their shadow. Pay close attention to how they act when you're around. Do their smiles seem forced? Does their posture stiffen when you enter the room? People who secretly dislike you often betray their true feelings through nonverbal cues, no matter how polished their words may be. They might avoid direct eye contact, cross their arms defensively, or offer a laugh that doesn't quite reach their eyes. These micro-expressions are involuntary, revealing the discomfort they feel in your presence. Unlike someone who's genuinely happy to see you, their body language tells a different story, one of tension and unease. While they may claim everything is fine, their physical reactions don't lie, offering you a glimpse into the hostility they're trying to conceal. Gossip is another weapon in the arsenal of someone who secretly resents you. Instead of confronting you directly, they'll spread rumors, share half-truths, or plant seeds of doubt about you within your social or professional circle. This indirect approach allows them to damage your reputation while maintaining their own image as a neutral or even sympathetic party. You might hear snippets of conversations that suddenly stop when you walk in, or catch wind of stories about you that have been twisted just enough to cast you in a negative light. The key here is the cowardice of their method. They won't say these things to your face, but they'll ensure others do, creating a web of passive aggression that's hard to untangle. A particularly painful sign is when someone who should be cheering you on instead responds to your successes with indifference, or worse, thinly veiled resentment. While everyone experiences envy from time to time, those who secretly hate you will struggle to hide their displeasure when good things happen for you. They might downplay your achievements, "Oh, that's nice," change the subject abruptly, or even refocus the conversation on their own accomplishments. In more extreme cases, they'll actively sabotage your moment, perhaps by pointing out some unrelated flaw or suggesting your success was just luck. Their inability to genuinely celebrate you reveals a deep-seated bitterness, one that festers beneath their polite facade. Gaslighting is another sinister tactic used by those who harbor hidden animosity. They'll deny saying things you clearly remember, insist your perceptions are flawed, or twist events to make you question your own sanity. For example, if you confront them about a hurtful comment, they might respond with, "You're so sensitive, I never said that," or "You're imagining things." Over time, This erodes your confidence in your own judgment, leaving you dependent on their version of reality. Gaslighting is particularly dangerous because it's so insidious. It doesn't just mask their hatred, it makes you complicit in your own manipulation, doubting yourself while they maintain control. Subtle exclusion is another red flag. They'll forget to invite you to gatherings, leave you out of group chats, or make plans in front of you without including you. When called out, they'll offer flimsy excuses, "Oh, we thought you were busy," or "It was just a last-minute thing." But the pattern repeats. This tactic is designed to isolate you socially while giving them cover to claim it was all an innocent oversight. The message is clear: you're not truly welcome, but they won't say it outright. Instead, they'll make you feel like an outsider, forcing you to either confront them and risk seeming paranoid, or suffer in silence. Finally, watch for imitation that feels more like mockery than flattery. Someone who secretly resents you might copy your style, your ideas, or even your mannerisms, but with a twist that feels off. They'll adopt your catchphrases, but use them sarcastically. They'll replicate your projects, but frame theirs as superior. This behavior stems from a toxic mix of envy and competition. They're obsessed with you, but rather than appreciating you, they're fixated on outperforming or replacing you. It's not admiration, it's a silent war, one they're waging because they can't stand the thought of you shining on your own. Recognizing these signs isn't about fostering paranoia, it's about protecting your emotional well-being. People who operate this way rely on ambiguity to keep you guessing, but their patterns betray them. Once you see the truth, you can decide how much power to give them, or whether to remove them from your life entirely. The tendency to conceal hatred rather than express it openly speaks volumes about human psychology and social dynamics. At its core, this behavior often stems from a deep-seated fear of confrontation. Most people are wired to avoid direct conflict. It triggers primal anxieties about rejection, retaliation, or social exile. From a Jungian perspective, this avoidance isn't just about keeping the peace. It reflects how the ego protects itself from the discomfort of acknowledging its own shadow. When someone harbors negative feelings they can't reconcile with their self-image as a good person, suppression becomes their default defense mechanism. They'd rather choke down their resentment than risk the vulnerability that comes with honest communication. This creates a toxic paradox where their unexpressed hostility leaks out in passive-aggressive behaviors, the very behaviors that ultimately damage relationships far more than direct confrontation ever could. Social conditioning plays an equally powerful role in this dynamic. From childhood, we're taught that overt hatred is unacceptable, that nice people don't admit to petty jealousies or simmering resentments. This creates what Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to conform to societal expectations. When someone's genuine feelings clash with this idealized self-presentation, their shadow takes over in indirect ways. They'll smile to your face while undermining you behind your back because that's the compromise their psyche has devised. Satisfy the shadow's need to express hostility while preserving the persona's appearance of propriety. This explains why so much hidden hatred manifests in socially acceptable forms: gossip couched as concern, exclusion framed as oversight, or criticism disguised as helpfulness. The more invested someone is in maintaining their nice person image, the more creative their shadow becomes in finding loopholes to express what they can't admit. Perhaps the most psychologically revealing aspect of hidden hatred is how frequently it stems from projected insecurities. Jung emphasized that what we despise in others often mirrors what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. When someone secretly resents you, it's rarely about anything you've actually done. It's about some unhealed wound or unfulfilled aspect of their own life that your presence inadvertently highlights. Your confidence might expose their self-doubt, your success their feelings of inadequacy, or your authenticity their own emotional dishonesty. Rather than confront these painful truths within themselves, It's psychologically easier to transfer that discomfort onto you through subtle hostility. This projection serves as a defense mechanism, allowing them to externalize inner turmoil they aren't equipped to face. The tragic irony is that their buried hatred says far more about their own unresolved struggles than it does about your worth or behavior. This threefold explanation, fear, conditioning, and projection, reveals why hidden hatred is so pervasive yet so rarely addressed. The person nursing these feelings may not even consciously recognize them, let alone understand their origins. Their shadow operates in the blind spots of their awareness, expressing what their conscious mind denies. This makes the situation particularly challenging, as you're essentially dealing with emotions the other person hasn't admitted to themselves. Jung's framework helps illuminate why these dynamics persist. Until individuals develop the self-awareness to integrate their shadow, their unresolved hostilities will continue to surface in these indirect, damaging ways. The silver lining is that recognizing these patterns allows you to respond with clarity rather than confusion, understanding that another person's hidden hatred is their burden to carry, not yours to fix or absorb. When you recognize that someone in your life secretly harbors resentment toward you, the first and most crucial step is to resist the urge to take it personally. This is often far more challenging than it sounds. We're wired to internalize others' behavior, especially when it comes from people we care about. But the truth is, another person's hidden hatred almost always says more about their inner world than it does about you. Their reactions are filtered through their own unresolved wounds, insecurities, and projections. Perhaps you unintentionally trigger their feelings of inadequacy, or maybe you represent something they've denied within themselves. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding this psychological dynamic can help you detach emotionally. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" consider asking, "What might this reveal about what they're struggling with?" This shift in perspective doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment. It simply means you stop allowing their unresolved issues to dictate your self-worth. Before drawing conclusions or confronting someone, it's essential to look for consistent patterns rather than isolated incidents. One backhanded compliment or odd interaction might be a misunderstanding, but when you notice the same subtle behaviors repeating, the constant nitpicking, the habitual exclusion, the persistent undermining, you're likely seeing intentional hostility rather than coincidence. Keep a mental, or even written, record of these interactions. Do they only behave this way with you, or do they treat others similarly? Is their behavior worse when you're succeeding or receiving attention? Patterns reveal truth where single instances might mislead. This observational approach serves two purposes. It prevents you from overreacting to minor slights while also giving you clarity about which relationships might need reevaluation. Just as Jung studied recurring symbols in dreams to understand the unconscious, we can study behavioral patterns to understand hidden dynamics in relationships. Once you've identified a genuine pattern of hostility, setting clear boundaries becomes necessary for your emotional well-being. Boundaries aren't about changing the other person, they're about deciding what you will and won't accept in your life. This might mean limiting time with someone who constantly criticizes you, calmly calling out passive-aggressive comments that felt like a backhanded compliment. Was that your intention? Or distancing yourself from chronic gossips. The key is to enforce these boundaries consistently and without apology. People accustomed to expressing hostility indirectly often push back when confronted with directness. They may accuse you of being too sensitive or claim you're imagining things. This is where your observation of patterns serves as armor. When you know the truth of their behavior, their gaslighting loses power. Remember, boundaries aren't punishment, they're self-preservation. You're not obligated to endure subtle hostility to keep the peace. Jung's concept of shadow integration offers perhaps the most profound approach to dealing with hidden hatred, not just in others, but in ourselves. He believed that until we acknowledge and make peace with our own darker impulses, our capacity for jealousy, pettiness, or resentment, we'll continue projecting them onto others. When someone's hidden hostility affects you deeply, ask yourself why their behavior triggers such a strong reaction. Does it tap into your own insecurities? Does it remind you of past relationships where you felt similarly undermined? This isn't about blaming yourself for others' behavior, but about recognizing where your own shadow might be involved in the dynamic. The more you understand your own emotional triggers and unresolved wounds, the less power others' hidden hatred will have over you. Paradoxically, by doing this inner work, you often find that toxic relationships either improve because you're no longer feeding the dynamic, or naturally fade away because you've outgrown them. Ultimately, navigating hidden hatred in relationships requires a balance of wisdom and self-compassion. Wisdom to recognize that much of what people direct at you isn't really about you at all, and self-compassion to honor your right to be treated with basic respect. You don't need to devote endless energy to analyzing why someone resents you. Some mysteries aren't worth solving. What matters most is how you choose to protect your peace. Sometimes the most powerful response to hidden hostility is simply to live so authentically and fully that the opinions of those who secretly dislike you become irrelevant. When you stop rearranging yourself to accommodate someone else's unspoken issues, you reclaim the energy they've been draining from you, energy better spent on relationships that nourish rather than diminish you. As we've explored today, hidden hatred often reveals itself in subtle but unmistakable patterns: the excessive criticism disguised as concern, the backhanded compliments that leave you unsettled, the uncomfortable body language that contradicts polite words. These behaviors, rooted in what Carl Jung called the shadow self, create an undercurrent of tension in relationships where everything appears fine on the surface. The gossip, the lack of celebration for your successes, the gaslighting, the subtle exclusion, they're all symptoms of resentment that someone can't or won't express directly. Recognizing these signs isn't about becoming paranoid, but about developing emotional discernment to protect your peace. There's profound wisdom in Jung's teaching that what we resist persists, both in others and in ourselves. While we've focused on identifying hidden hatred in those around us, there's equal power in turning this lens inward. Sometimes, the very dynamics we find most hurtful mirror our own unacknowledged shadows. Do we secretly fear being disliked, making us hyper-aware of others' disapproval? Are there relationships where we've been the one masking resentment with polite smiles? This isn't about self-blame, but about liberation. The more we integrate our own shadows, the less we're thrown off balance by them in others. True emotional freedom begins when we can observe others' hidden hostility with curiosity rather than devastation, recognizing it as their burden to carry rather than ours to fix. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever sensed someone close to you secretly resented you? What subtle signs tipped you off? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help others recognize these patterns in their own lives. If this exploration of hidden psychology resonated with you, don't forget to like this video. It helps others discover this content. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our deep dives into human behavior, where we continue unraveling the unconscious patterns that shape our relationships. Remember, the most powerful tool against hidden hostility isn't retaliation. It's the self-awareness that keeps you anchored in your worth, regardless of who can't see it.